You're standing in a small European village centuries ago. The air is heavy with grief as a family lays their loved one to the rest. But before the body can be buried, someone unusual arrives. A person shrouded in mystery, feared by many, yet essential for the soul's journey into the afterlife. This was the Sin Eater. Sin eating was a folk ritual practiced primarily in the parts of England and Wales between the Middle Ages and the early 20th century. It stemmed from beliefs about sin and salvation, specifically the idea that if someone died without confessing all their sins, those sins might weigh down their soul, preventing it from reaching heaven. To solve this problem, communities turned to sin eaters. These individuals would perform a simple yet eerie act. They'd eat the food or drink placed on or near the corpse. By doing so, they symbolically absorbed the sins of the deceased, freeing their soul to move on peacefully. These sin eaters weren't priests or holy figures. They were often poor outcasts, chosen not because of any special skill, but because no one else wanted the job. Think of them as society's scapegoats. Their role made them untouchable, literally and figuratively. Sin eaters lived on the fringes of society. People believed they carried the spiritual burdens of countless souls, making them spiritually unclean. Despite performing what some saw as a sacred duty, they were despised and ostracized. Yet they accepted the work because it paid, though barely enough to survive. In practice, their job was following. During the funeral, mourners would place a piece of bread, a bowl of ale, or even salt on the chest of the deceased. The sin eater would then approach the body, recite the short prayer, and consume the offering. The belief was that the sins transferred to the food and thus to the sin eater. Once consumed, the sins were supposedly erased from the dead person's record, allowing their soul to ascend to heaven. However, sin eaters had no way to cleanse themselves of the sins they carried. There was no ritual or ceremony to free them from their burden. Their fate was sealed. They were doomed to bear the weight of countless souls until their own deaths. And there was no chance for them to enter heaven. Essentially, they sacrificed their own salvation to ensure the deceased's safe passage into the afterlife. It's interesting that the sin eating wasn't officially sanctioned by any major religion. In fact, it clashed directly with Christian teachings about confession and absolution. As religious reforms swept across Europe, especially during the Protestant Reformation, practices like sin eating began to lose credibility. By the late 19th and early 20th centuries, sin eating had largely disappeared. Improved education, declining superstition, and changing attitudes toward death sealed its fate. Today it survives only in folklore and scattered historical accounts.